Hi, this is John again, the owner and developer of VectorDecks. In this tutorial, we're going to go over how you can bring your custom-made baluster objects into VectorDecks so its Use Real Objects menus will have it available for you. Now with baluster objects, there's a lot more information you need before you can bring it over into VectorDecks. Unlike things like the skirts and the caps, they have a fixed location on your rail. For example, the skirt obviously is going to finish to the deck surface, and the caps, I told all the posts and the sleeves to always finish 2 inches above the rail height, and you have two options, 36 and 42, so those are given locations. And also the top rail is to be extruded at the center at 36 or 42, and the bottom rail to also be extruded 3 inches off the floor. But the baluster is really dependent on things like the depth of the top rail and the depth of the bottom rail. So that's one of the main reasons why I created this template. So before I bring in or create any baluster, I want to make sure that it's going to be placed correctly within the VectorDecks document. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit more detail than I did with the other objects. What I do first, let me get this out of the way and I'll show you what I mean. In fact, I'm going to delete those too. What I do first is I take the top rail and the bottom rail, which you really need to know first before you actually create a baluster for these two components. Again, I had that PDF of this particular railing style, and its baluster happens to be 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches, and it has these little edged edge assigned to it. So I've created a two-dimensional image of that, and then before I do anything else with it, I virtually place these objects where they would actually be drawn within VectorDecks. The top rail from the center, top center down to the deck surface for a 36-inch rail would obviously be 36. So I duplicated the rail and I put it over here and set it at 36. I centered a line down here, and then I took the bottom rail. It's also important to note if a rail has anything like this on one face and not the other, you want to make it to the right side. It's how VectorDecks draws its object. It draws its objects clockwise. So it's important that this particular little niche here be on the right side, not the left. Then once I have these in the exact locations I know they're going to be on the deck, now I know how tall to make the baluster, and also how far the baluster should be off the deck surface. Now the baluster needs to finish at this point here, and it needs to finish at this. Unlike the top rail, the bottom rail has a little flexibility and control that you have. There is an actual parameter that you could set, and that's the opening at the bottom of the rail. I find that 3 inches pretty much works everywhere, but if you change that to 2.5, and you made a baluster finish flush here, it won't fit all the way. So if you notice here, you do have a little bit of room inside here to make the baluster slightly longer. So I first measured the actual distance, and I see it's 28 5/8. I got a little room in here to extend that baluster. That way, this baluster that you create, it may work on other different type of top rail and bottom rails, and if you lower that below 3 inches, it'll still work. But it'll definitely work on this particular style because it's coming all from the same manufacturer. Now next, I just take and draw in here just a basic rectangle. It's supposed to be the width 1.25 based on that information I got, and then I play around with the length. See, I can go down farther. I have a look over here. Looks like I can probably go all the way to 30 inches. Let's see. Yeah, that's enough. So now I can use a 30-inch baluster here, and it'll work all the way down to probably a couple inches here, because I extended it in here a little bit, and also it finishes flush with that top. And then what I also do is do the same thing for the 42-inch. So I'm going to take this and duplicate it, and let's drag this top corner over to here. Make sure I'm in that pocket. It doesn't want to drag sometimes. It's the handle plays around with the dimension. Here we go. And in all likelihood, because it's just 6 inches taller, we can probably just change this to 36 and it should work the same. Yeah, see, it does right there. Now I know that I need to have a baluster that's 30 inches long, and it'll work on this particular rail style, even with the changes on the bottom, on both 36 and on this one 36 inches, so it works on the 42. And it may even work for some other rails, but if it doesn't, then you're going to have to come back and create another baluster for them, because balusters are solid objects. Once they're popped into VectorDecks, they are what they are. But the next important thing is where it's placed into that object. And because we made this the full 30 inches, I need to make sure that we actually bring it in and put it into that symbol edit mode at this height. So I went ahead and measured, and this particular height is 3 3/4. So we know that the baluster should start at 3 3/4 off from the bottom. It should be 30 inches for the 36 and 36 for the 42. And then I already extruded these two to make that. I'll show you. I'll go to the top view here, or front view. See, I already made these two balusters ahead of time. But now we're ready to go back and work with them within the VectorDecks document, and we have the correct information to place it into that document. So I'm going to start out with the 36-inch one first. Now you need to select the 3-dimensional one, not the 2-dimensional one, and do a copy. Then we're going to go over to that blank document and paste it in here. Now you need to move it again to dead center point. Now we're in a top view of this, so even though it looks like it's 2-dimensional, see if I go to a front view, you see it's a 3-dimensional object. Now we're ready to go ahead and insert this into the resource. Now go ahead and scroll down to that VectorDecks data folder, double click on it. Now this is a baluster object, so you'll see the particular called rail balusters. Go ahead and double click on it to open it. I have a few more different kind of rail styles here. Now the closest rail style to this new baluster is probably this 1.5-inch square for a 36-inch rail. So I'm going to select it and duplicate it. And we'll just change this to 5 1/4. 36-inch rail. Do away with this -2. Okay, here we got it there. Now we're going to have to go ahead and select this, do a copy, and get into that new rail we created. I right-clicked and selected Edit, and now you see it's a 3D component. So select OK. Now this particular object here is the 1.5-inch square baluster that we had previously copied. But we're going to do away with this one, and we're going to go ahead and paste in our new one. We're going to grab its center and place it dead center. And next we're going to look at that front view, because if you remember, on that template I had, I needed to make sure that the bottom of the rail was 3 3/4 inches up from the surface. So let's go back over here and let's see how high this is here. I'm going to make sure you're in screen view when you're working with different dimensional tools. I'm going to select this dimension tool, and click here and click the bottom. And yep, as expected, it's 3 3/4. Now if it's not, you need to make sure you move that bottom to that exact dimension, 3 3/4. Otherwise, it's not going to be placed in the rail correctly. Now before we get out of here, let's go back to top view. We're still dead center. Let's go to that objects record. So you deselect it, and now we have just 2 dimensions that are critical again for VectorDecks to insert it properly, and that's the width and the depth, and they're wrong. They're 1.5 inches, so we need to make those 1.25 inches. So let's go ahead and do that. 1.25 inches, and the depth also 1.25 inches. That's good. Now we're set to go. We can go ahead and exit this, and you'll see here the baluster now is here, ready to go. Now we need to go over and bring in that 42-inch rail at the same time. But before I do that, I always like to do a save, because if we have a computer crash, I lose all that information. So I'm going to do again a save as template, and go ahead and select that VectorDecks 10. Now let's go back over to that template and go ahead and select that 42-inch one. Do a copy and go back over to that document. Zoom in a little closer and do a paste. Let's go ahead and center that again too. Now let's go over here and duplicate a rail to create this 42-inch rail. And the easiest one to do is the one we just made, because those dimensions are already there. So I'm going to select it and duplicate, change that to a 42-inch rail. And the 1.25 inches can stay the same. And click OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this rail, go in and edit that 42-inch. There we go. And let's take that 36-inch out. Let's paste the 42-inch in, move it to its center. Let's double check that elevation again. Front. We are in screen plane. Let's check that height. Yep, 33 3/4. So we're good here. Now we have both rails in. The record format shouldn't need to be changed. There's the only 2, width and depth, and we copy that same one. And now we can exit, and we have both the 42-inch rail and the 36-inch rail baluster. Now before we go any farther, again we're going to do that save. So I'm going to remove that object, do a save as template, and go ahead and overwrite that VectorDecks 10. Now in our next tutorial, we're going to go over the creation of a center object, and again there's going to be a lot more information you need, but we'll cover that in our next tutorial.